Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is genuinely good to have you with us today.
It is.
You know, usually when we sit down at these microphones, we're looking outward.
Mm-hmm.
We're scanning the horizon for historical shifts, or we're digging into the weeds of some new tech that's going to change how we all buy groceries or,
Yeah.
Global market trends. We're usually looking at the what of the world.
That's our bread and butter, isn't it? The what and the when.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today
Mm-hmm.
we're going to pivot. We are doing something a little different.
A little bit of an inward turn.
A huge inward turn. We are turning the lens on ourselves. We're going to look at the mechanism that actually lets us understand all of that other stuff in the first place. We are looking at the art of communication itself.
Specifically, we're unpacking a really interesting stack of sources that all focus on the craft of writing. And I feel like I need to put a massive disclaimer right up front here, because I can almost hear some of you reaching for the skip button. You might be thinking, okay, guys, I am not a novelist. I don't plan on writing the next Game of Thrones. I'm an accountant, or I'm a nurse, or I'm a project manager. This isn't for me.
I was actually going to ask you about that right off the bat. Who is this deep dive really for? Are we just talking to the aspiring Stephen Kings out there, the people who have a half-finished manuscript in their desk drawer?
Not at all. And that is the beauty of this specific stack of research. We're calling it the learner appeal.
The learner appeal. Okay.
What we found in these sources, which, by the way, come from a massive January compilation of literary techniques, plus a whole stack of expert advice columns, is that studying writing is actually just studying thinking.
Say more about that.
It's about how we as human beings process stories, how we persuade each other, and, frankly, how our brains generate creativity in the first place.
So if you want to write a book, that's great. But if you just want to write better emails that actually get opened,
Or persuade your boss to give you that raise.
or even just understand how you're being manipulated by the media you consume every day, this is a toolkit for you.
Exactly. We're getting a behind-the-curtain view of how words actually shape reality. And the mission for this deep dive is pretty specific. We're not just going to list grammar rules. That would be boring.
Already bored.
We're going to decode something called the iceberg theory, which sounds ominous, but is actually a masterclass in psychology. We're going to look at the neuroscience of doing nothing, which I have to say is my personal favorite part of the research.
I feel like I've been practicing for the doing nothing segment my entire life. I think I might be an expert.
We'll see. The research suggests it's actually much harder than it sounds, at least to do it effectively.
Fair enough.
And we're also going to find out why slowing down might be the secret weapon for writing fast-paced action. But let's start where the sources start. Let's start with the mental game.
The mindset.
The mindset. Because whenever you talk about creative work or any kind of high-level professional work, there's this heavy, foggy mythology around it. The tortured artist, the lightning bolt of inspiration.
Oh, absolutely. The idea that you have to be touched by the gods. I think the common perception, and I've certainly thought this myself, is that becoming a professional writer or a top-tier creative of any kind is basically like winning the lottery.
A 1 in a million shot.
Exactly. You have a 1 in a million chance, so why even bother trying?
And that is probably the most persistent myth in the game. And we have a source here, the fantasy author Brandon Sanderson, who tackles this head on.
And Sanderson is a heavyweight. I mean, the guy is prolific.
Millions and millions of words. And he talks about the odds of making it as a writer. And he argues that the 1 in a million statistic is mathematically false.
Mathematically false.
Yeah.
How so? I mean, there are literally millions of people trying to write books.
Yes, but, and this is the key, Sanderson makes this vital distinction between people who want to write and people who actually do the work.
Oh.
He says people told him constantly when he was starting out that it was 1 in a million. But his experience, now that he's on the inside of the industry, seeing the query letters and the manuscripts, is that if you account for the actual work involved, the odds shift dramatically.
Break that down for us. What does the work mean in this context? Is it just word count?
It's more than that. He means people who actually dedicate themselves to the craft, meaning they study the structure of stories, they practice writing on a regular basis, they revise their work.
They treat it like a job, not just a hobby.
Exactly. And for that specific group of people, he says the odds are closer to 1 in 20, maybe 1 in 30.
Okay, hang on. That is a massive shift. 1 in a million is impossible. That's don't quit your day job territory.
For sure.
But 1 in 20 is, well, it's competitive, obviously, but it's doable. That's within the realm of possibility.
Right. He actually compares it to medical school. If you went to med school orientation and the dean stood up and said, look, you're going to study for years, you're going to work insane hours, you'll take incredibly difficult exams, and at the end of all that, you have about a 1 in 20 chance of becoming a doctor, what would you think?
I'd think, okay, that sounds tough. I'd say it's rigorous.
Exactly. You'd say it's difficult, but you wouldn't say it's crazy difficult. You wouldn't say it's impossible. It's a profession. It's not magic. And that's the first mindset shift the source wants us to make. We need to stop looking for magic and start looking for the process.
It's about removing the mysticism and replacing it with discipline. But let's be honest, even if you know the odds are better than you thought, there is still the terror of the moment.
Oh,
The
yeah.
terror of the pitch or the audition or just hitting send on that big project. And speaking of that terror, there's this incredible story in the source material about Bruce Springsteen.
This is an absolute gem of a story. And it's not about him playing some stadium packed with 80,000 people. It's about his audition in 1972 for John Hammond.
And for anyone who doesn't know the industry history, you have to set the stakes here. Who is John Hammond?
John Hammond is a titan. He's the gatekeeper. This is the man who signed Bob Dylan.
Oh,
He signed Aretha Franklin. He discovered Billie Holiday. If you wanted to be a serious musician in the 20th century, Hammond was the guy you had to impress. So you can imagine the pressure.
it's immense. I mean, that's a career-making moment.
And Springsteen is just this scruffy kid from Jersey at this point. He's standing in the elevator going up to this audition at the record label in New York City. And he admits in the source that he was on the verge of total panic. His heart is hammering. His hands are sweating. He's about to face the man who made Dylan.
I would be hyperventilating in the corner. I'd probably just push the button for the lobby and run away,
Yeah.
honestly.
Most people would. But Springsteen did something he calls mental jujitsu.
Mental jujitsu. I love that phrasing. It implies using the momentum of the fear against itself. What exactly did he do?
It's a cognitive reframing technique. It's really powerful. He's in the elevator and he has this internal monologue. He tells himself something like, okay, look, I've got nothing. I have zero record deal right now. I am a nobody,
So he's starting from zero.
starting from absolute zero. He says, so I have nothing to lose. If nothing happens up there, if he hates me, if he kicks me out, I'm going to walk out of this building the exact same person I was when I walked in.
That is so powerful. It's like he preemptively accepted the worst case scenario to take the teeth out of it.
Precisely. He neutralized the fear by accepting the baseline. He realized the worst case was just his current reality. He wasn't going to die. He wasn't going to lose any money. He was just going to leave as Bruce from Jersey.
So the fear just vanishes.
It evaporates.
It's good.
Because the fear was based on this idea of loss. By realizing he had nothing to lose, he kind of became bulletproof in that moment.
Then he walks in.
He walks in, he's loose, he's confident, he performs. It's hard to be a saint in the city. And Hammond tells him right there on the spot, you've got to be on Columbia Records.
And the rest is history. But, and the source makes a really important distinction here that I think applies to everyone listening, it wasn't just the mind trick that got him signed.
No. And that is the danger of these self-help anecdotes if you don't read the fine print. You can't just mindset your way into success if you don't have the goods.
Right.
The mental jujitsu got him in the room without fainting. It allowed him to function. But what got him signed was the 10 years of playing in bars, the calluses on his fingers, the studying of other guitarists, the songwriting craft, all that work.
Right. If he had walked in there with all the confidence in the world, but played, terrible music, Hammond would have just politely shown him the door.
Exactly. Springsteen has this quote in the text that sums it up perfectly. He says, you've got to imagine the person you want to be before you can be them. But then you need to acquire the skills to actually become that person.
Yeah.
So the confidence opens the door, but the competence is what keeps you in the room. You cannot hack your way around the work. But, and this is where the research takes a fascinating turn, the work doesn't always look like work. Sometimes the work looks like staring at a wall.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because this is the section on the neuroscience of doing nothing. And like I said, I feel like I'm a natural at this, but I have a feeling the science is a little more specific than just being lazy.
It is. There's a huge difference between distraction and true idleness. This research comes from Dr. Nancy Andreessen, who's a leading neuroscientist. She conducted this brain imaging study to see what happens in the brains of highly creative people when they are just, drifting.
We're talking about those idle moments, right, when you're not actively trying to solve a problem.
Exactly. She calls them free-floating periods of thought, or the acronym she uses is REST. Random episodic silent thinking.
Rest. I like that.
She looked at historical giants to see how they used this. We're talking about Einstein, Mozart, Da Vinci. And the common thread was that they all had this habit of aggressively protecting their downtime.
I remember reading about Einstein and his little boat, the
That's
Tynef.
a Tynef, yes, which is Yiddish for piece of junk.
Ah, perfect.
Einstein had this little wooden boat, and he famously refused to put an outboard motor on it. He didn't want to get anywhere fast. He just wanted to drift. He'd get stuck at sea so often that a friend eventually bought him a motor for emergencies, but he still wouldn't use it. He wanted the silence. He wanted the drift.
And the source mentions Mozart would compose entire pieces in his head while he was just waiting for his turn at the billiard table.
Right. And Da Vinci would apparently sit in front of a painting for half a day and not make a single brush stroke, just looking. To an outside observer or a modern boss, they look lazy. They look like they're wasting company time.
They're not being productive.
Exactly. But the brain scans tell a completely different story. Dr. Andreessen found that during these resting states, the brain is not passive. It's actually incredibly active, but in a different way. The association cortex is just lighting up like a Christmas tree.
And for those of us who aren't neuroscientists, what is the association cortex responsible for? What does it do?
It's the part of the brain responsible for linking information. Think about it. When you are focused on a specific task like writing a report or doing a math problem or replying to an email, your brain is in execution mode. It's narrow, it's focused.
Tunnel vision.
Right. But when you drift, when you enter that rest state, the association cortex starts connecting dots that don't normally go together. It pulls a memory from 10 years ago and connects it with a problem you're trying to solve today.
That is where the aha moment comes from.
So the brain essentially defaults to creativity if we just let it.
That's the key phrase, if we let it. And this is the warning in the source, and it's a pretty dire one for the modern age.
I think I know where this is going.
In a world where we constantly pull out our phones the second we are bored, waiting in line at the grocery store, sitting in a taxi, even during a commercial break, we are actually short-circuiting this entire creative process. That is a scary thought. We are scrolling away our genius. We are filling the silence with noise so the connections never get a chance to be made.
Exactly. We are killing the incubation period. The brain needs that downtime to consolidate and connect information in novel ways. If you fill every spare second with a podcast or a TikTok or a news feed, you are essentially starving your association cortex. You're never giving it the space to do its real work.
So the prescription here is actually to be bored, intentionally, to just sit there and exist.
It is reclaim your boredom. It's a productive state. It's not a waste of time.
Okay, so we've got the mental prep figured out, the discipline, the jujitsu, the strategic boredom. Now let's get into the actual nuts and bolts of writing, the craft itself, because the sources spend a lot of time on fiction techniques, but they make the point that these techniques really apply to communication in general.
And we have to start with the heavy hitter, the big one, Ernest Hemingway.
The patron saint of less is more.
He absolutely is. And the core concept here is, of course, the iceberg theory.
I feel like I've heard this referenced a million times in English lit classes, but I've never actually looked at the mechanics of it. What does it actually mean for a writer or, any communicator?
It's deceptive in its simplicity. Hemingway believed that the visible text, the words you actually see on the page, is just the tip of the iceberg, maybe 10% of the total mass.
Okay, so just the very top.
The other 90%, the emotion, the history between characters, the motivation, the secret fears, the context, all of that lies beneath the surface. It's underwater.
But, and this is the kicker, right? The readers still have to feel that 90%.
Right. That is the magic trick. He writes, if a writer of prose knows enough about what he is writing, he may omit things that he knows, and the reader will have a feeling of those things as strongly as though the writer had stated them.
The key phrase there being knows enough. You can't just leave stuff out because you don't know it. That's just bad writing. That's confusion. That's a hole.
Exactly. If you leave it out because you're lazy, the story feels hollow. It feels empty. If you leave it out because you are exercising restraint, the story feels heavy with subtext. The source uses Hemingway's short story Hills Like White Elephants as the prime example. Have you read this one?
I read it years ago. It's a conversation between a man and a woman at a train station in Spain, right? Just sitting there.
Yes. And on the surface, if you just look at the dialogue, what are they talking about?
They're talking about beer. They're talking about how the dry hills in the distance kind of look like white elephants. They're talking about a beaded curtain in the doorway. It just seems like idle chatter.
Well, what are they really talking about?
They're talking about an abortion.
But the word abortion never appears in the text. Not once. Hemingway gives us only the surface details. Her looking away at the dry hills, him ordering another drink just to avoid eye contact, the clipped, tense dialogue. There's that famous line where she gets so frustrated with his pressure that she says, "Would you please, 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 please stop talking?"
Oh, man. You feel the desperation in that repetition. You feel the pressure he's putting on her and her fear of everything changing. You feel the weight of the decision without him ever spelling it out.
That is the iceberg. The emotional load is underwater. If Hemingway had written, she was terrified about the procedure and he just wanted her to do it so they could keep traveling and having fun, it would be, well, it'd be boring.
It would be a soap opera. Melodramatic.
Exactly. By not saying it, it becomes real. It forces the reader to engage their own emotions and intelligence.
It also respects the reader, doesn't it? It treats you like an adult who can figure things out.
That is a huge part of it. The source talks about the trust factor. Writers, especially new ones, or even just people writing business emails, tend to over-explain because they don't trust their audience.
They're afraid you won't get it.
Right. So they act like a nervous tour guide, pointing out every single emotion. Look, she's sad now. And look over here, he's angry. And notice this. This is important.
Which leads us to this great acronym in the text that I'm going to start using, RUE.
RUE, resist the urge to explain.
It sounds like a tattoo every communicator should get.
It really is. The rule is basically this. Don't clarify what is already shown. Don't label emotions. Don't translate the subtext for the reader. If you show a guy slamming his fist on the table, you don't need to add, "he said angrily."
We know he's angry. He just slammed his fist on the table.
We get it.
Can we give a concrete example? Because I think this is where people get stuck. They think, well, if I don't say it, how will they know for sure?
Sure. Let's say you want to show a character is scared. Maybe she's trying to get into her house because she thinks someone is chasing her. The telling version, the explaining version would be something like, she was terrified as she tried to unlock the door.
Okay. It conveys the information. We know she's scared, but it's dull. It's like a police report.
Right. It's just a label. Terrified. Now, apply RUE. Don't use the label. Just describe the behavior. The source suggests something more like, her fingers trembled as she tried twice to fit the key into the lock.
Oh, that's so much better. The detail of tried twice. You can see the fumbling. You can feel the panic without being told the word panic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Focus on the behavior, not the label. The source actually suggests a 2-paragraph rewrite exercise, which I think is brilliant for anyone listening who wants to practice this.
Walk us through it. How does it work?
Okay, step 1. Write a short paragraph where a character is in some kind of conflict, maybe an argument, and spell out everything. Every single emotion, every motivation. He was angry because she lied. She felt guilty but also defensive. He wanted to leave. Just dump it all on the page.
Get it all out of your system. The vomit draft, as they say.
Right. Then, step 2. Rewrite that exact same scene using only behavioral cues, sensory details, and dialogue. No internal monologue explaining feelings, no adverbs like angrily or sadly.
And the claim is that the second version will always be stronger.
It will be more powerful and more mysterious. It invites the reader to lean in and participate in creating the story. When you explain everything, you deny the reader what the source calls the joy of discovery. I love that phrase, the joy of discovery. It's like, let me connect the dots. Don't pre-connect them for me.
Precisely. If you connect the dots for them, they are just a passive observer. If they connect the dots themselves, they are a co-creator of the story. They're invested.
Okay, so that's how we handle scenes. That's how we handle the action. But what about the people in them? The source material goes really deep into character construction, and it moves beyond the basics pretty quickly.
Yeah, it does. It mentions Myers-Briggs as a potential starting point. Are they an introvert or an extrovert, a thinker or a feeler, which can be a good shorthand.
Quick profile generator.
Exactly. But then it gives us these 10 keys to character creation that are much more specific and, I think, much more actionable.
Let's hit the highlights of these because some of them are really surprising. The first one is likability.
And this is crucial and so often misunderstood. Likability in fiction doesn't mean nice. It doesn't mean the character is a saint. It means compelling.
Okay, so you don't have to like them, but you have to be interested in them.
You need to give the reader a reason to root for them, or at least be fascinated by them. Maybe they have a really relatable flaw. Maybe they have a moral compass, even if it's a bit bent or skewed.
Or, and I like this one a lot, they care for something vulnerable, a child, an animal.
The save the cat moment, this is a classic screenwriting trope. Even a hardened hitman becomes interesting if he's taking care of a sick kitten. It shows a sliver of humanity. It shows they have the capacity for love, which makes us want to follow them and see what happens.
Then there's the zag.
The zag. I love this concept. It's based on the simple idea that when everyone else zigs, your character zags. It's all about destroying predictability. If a character reacts exactly how you expect them to in every single situation, they're boring. They're a robot.
Give us an example of a zag.
Okay, imagine a funeral scene. Everyone is crying. Everyone is somber. That's the zig. Your character. Maybe they start giggling uncontrollably. Not because they're mean or cruel, but because that's just how their brain processes grief.
Or they're totally focused on the catering.
Yes, that's a perfect zag. It makes them specific, it adds texture, it makes them feel real, because real people react weirdly to things all the time.
For sure. What about artifacts?
This is a great exercise for anyone listening. The question is, what's in their wallet? Or their purse? Or their glove compartment?
What do they carry around with them?
Yeah. Is it old receipts? A faded photo of an ex-lover? A lucky coin? A Blockbuster card they never threw away? These physical items anchor the character in reality and reveal what they value without them having to say a single word.
It's the show don't tell of character building. If someone carries a rosary in their pocket, but you know they never go to church, that tells you a whole story right there about their relationship with the faith.
Exactly. Which leads into the next point, which is contradictions.
Real people are walking paradoxes.
Totally. The source gives the example of a billionaire who insists on mowing his own lawn, or a rough-and-tumble biker who secretly writes delicate poetry. If you have a character who is just one thing, just a tough guy or just a rich guy, they're a caricature. The contradiction is what makes them human.
It's the friction between the different parts of their personality.
Yeah.
I also love the point about entrances.
Oh, yeah. First impressions matter so much. Don't just have a character walk into a room and say hello. Have them say something startling. Have them be in visible trouble. Have them enter through the window instead of the door. Make the reader sit up and take notice immediately. The entrance sets the contract for who this character is.
There's one here called time anchors that I found really insightful, not just for writing, but for understanding people in real life, too.
Yes. This is the idea that every character lives in three tenses simultaneously. They are haunted by the past, they are struggling in the present, and they are anxious or hopeful about the future.
And often, amateur writers just focus on the present struggle.
Right. They just focus on, he is trying to defuse the bomb. But knowing what haunts him from the past, maybe he failed to defuse one 10 years ago and someone got hurt, gives the character and the current struggle so much more depth.
And finally, let's talk about the private versus public self. The source calls this the friction point.
This one might be my favorite. It's the gap between how the character sees themselves, their private truth, and how the world sees them, their public version.
So, like, my private truth is, I think I'm holding this family together, but the public version the world sees is, you are cold and controlling.
Exactly. And the friction, the space between those two realities, is where the story lives. And here is the really profound insight from the source. No villain thinks they are the bad guy.
Right. Of course not. The Joker doesn't think he's the bad guy. Thanos thought he was saving the universe.
In their private self-image, they are completely justified. They are the hero of their own story. The conflict comes because their behavior clashes with everyone else's perception of reality. If you can identify that gap, the gap between intention and perception, you can write incredibly complex, compelling characters.
It's psychological layering. It's really cool stuff. It makes you look at your own life and wonder, what is the gap between my private self and my public self?
That's the danger of this deep dive. You start psychoanalyzing yourself.
Let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the internal game. We've talked about craft. Now let's talk about the actual mechanics of modern writing, because one of the questions in the source material is about attention spans. Are we now writing for a TikTok brain generation?
It's a valid question. It really is. The source asks, should the style of novels conform to the modern attention span? And the answer it gives is a nuanced yes.
But it explicitly says this isn't about dumbing down the content.
No, it's not dumbing down. It's adapting to a visual generation. Readers today, for the most part, grew up with video. They are used to seeing stories play out in real time. So those long, blocky paragraphs of static description like you'd find in Charles Dickens, where he literally stops the story to describe the fog for 3 pages, are very hard for a modern reader to digest.
We get impatient.
We get very impatient. So the advice is to write description within the action.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Don't pause the story to describe the room. Describe the room as the character moves through it. Instead of saying, the floorboards were rotten and the curtains were dusty, you write something like, he stumbled over the rotting floorboards and brushed aside the dusty curtains.
Ah, I see. You get the description, rotting floorboards, dusty curtains, but the action, the stumbling, the brushing, keeps the story moving forward.
Exactly. You embed the narrative in the thoughts and actions of the character. You keep it active. Keep the camera moving.
And related to this is pacing. There's a rule mentioned here from Mitch Albom, the author of Tuesdays with Morrie.
The Mitch Albom rule, I love this. It's write the fast parts slow and the slow parts fast.
That feels completely counterintuitive. I would assume you write fast action really fast with short, punchy sentences.
It does feel backward, but think about it. If you have a car crash or an explosion, that is a high adrenaline moment. In real life, it happens in a split second. But if you write it in a split second, the car crashed, he died. It has no impact on the reader. It's over before they can even feel it.
You have to slow down time.
Exactly. You use long, detailed sentences. You describe the shattering of the glass, the sound of the metal crunching, the smell of the burning rubber, the way the light spins across the dashboard. You make the reader live inside that split second for a full page. You stretch it out to maximize the impact. You force them to experience the trauma of the moment.
And conversely, if it's something boring, like a long lecture or a wait in a doctor's office,
you speed it up, you summarize. For an interminable hour, the professor droned on about economics. Boom, done. Don't make the reader sit through the boring hour just because the character had to. You skip the boring parts.
that is such practical, useful advice. Write the fast parts slow and the slow parts fast. I'm going to remember that for my next email.
Maybe not for an email about the quarterly meeting, but definitely for a story.
Speaking of practical advice, there is a section here specifically for the weekend warriors, the people who have full-time jobs, our accountants and nurses from earlier, but who still want to write.
The advice here is pretty simple. Don't burn yourself out trying to write every single day if you can't. There's this myth that real writers write every day. That's not true. Real writers write when they can.
So it's about consistency, not necessarily frequency.
Right. Pick one day, maybe Sunday afternoon, and make that your sacred, protected writing time. And then use those idle moments we talked about earlier, waiting rooms, school pickup lines. Use that time to think and scribble notes on your phone.
And there's a great little tip in here about the cut materials folder.
Oh, this is such a brilliant psychological hack. Revising is painful. Cutting your own words, it hurts. You feel like you are losing something valuable that you worked hard on.
I worked so hard on that paragraph. It's my baby. I can't just delete it.
Exactly. So the advice is, don't delete it, move it. Create a folder on your computer called Cut Materials or Scraps, and you just paste the deleted text in there.
So it's safe. It's not gone forever. It's just in the digital attic.
It's safe. You tell yourself, I can always go back and get it if I need it.
But do you ever actually go back and get it?
The source says almost never. And in my experience, I think I've gone back maybe twice in my entire life. But just knowing it's there allows you to make the cut without the emotional pain. It eases the sting of deletion. It tricks your brain into letting go.
That is brilliant. It's like organized digital hoarding.
Whatever works to get the draft done.
All right, we've focused heavily on fiction so far. And the source material makes a big point that nonfiction is a generous genre.
It calls it a house with many rooms, and I love that metaphor. You have narrative nonfiction, prescriptive, memoir, journalism, creative nonfiction. It's a big, welcoming umbrella.
And there is a crucial distinction made here between two types of nonfiction that people often confuse: the essay and the op-ed.
This is such a vital distinction for anyone who wants to write articles or blog posts or even just argue effectively. They're not the same thing, and confusing them leads to really bad writing.
Okay, let's break it down. What's the core difference?
It starts with the purpose. An essay is about exploration. The goal is to think on the page. You are wandering, you're questioning, you're reflecting. You don't necessarily know the answer when you start writing.
The metaphor the source uses is a greenhouse.
Yes. An essay is like a greenhouse. You can grow things, you can branch out, you can wander around and look at the different plants. It doesn't necessarily need a hard, tidy conclusion. The journey of thinking is the point.
And the op-ed, what's that?
An op-ed, which stands for opposite the editorial page, is about persuasion. It is staking a claim. The goal is to move the reader from point A to point B. You are arguing for something specific.
And the metaphor there is a small house.
Right. It's built, it has a foundation, which is your thesis, it has walls, which is your evidence, and it has a roof, which is your strong conclusion. It's not for wandering, it's for shelter. It's structural and assertive. You invite the reader in to show them your specific point of view.
So if I'm writing about my complicated memories of a childhood Christmas and how it makes me feel about aging and time passing, that's an essay.
Correct. It's reflective. It's a greenhouse. You're exploring a feeling.
But if I'm writing about why we need to ban plastic straws to save the turtles, that's an op-ed.
Exactly. You are trying to convince me of something. And the tone changes too. Essays are often intimate, conversational. Op-eds are punchy, assertive, authoritative. Knowing which one you're writing before you start saves you a lot of headache.
The source also touches on journalism as a form of nonfiction, specifically the importance of curiosity. And there's a great little anecdote here involving the host of one of the sources and William Bennett.
Yes, this is a fantastic lesson in courage. So, the writer was a young reporter sent to cover a press conference with William Bennett, who was the former Secretary of Education. Now, this writer had done their homework. They knew that Bennett had a past in the SDS Students for a Democratic Society.
Which is a pretty radical left-wing group back in the 60s.
Very radical. And of course, Bennett was known later in life as a prominent conservative, so there's this huge ideological shift. He went from radical left to the conservative establishment, and the reporter wanted to ask, why? What changed? How did you get from there to here? It's a great question. It's the obvious question.
What?
But they were intimidated. They were a young reporter surrounded by these big shot journalists from the New York Times and the Washington Post with cameras and everything. The room was tense. The reporter felt like a fraud. So they just stayed quiet. They didn't raise their hand.
And did anyone else ask the question?
No one asked. The press conference ended and the question just went unasked. It hung in the air.
Ugh, that is the worst feeling. Walking out of a room knowing you left the story on the table because you were scared.
And the lesson the writer took from that is, curiosity requires courage. If you have the question, you have to ask it. Don't assume someone else will. Don't assume your question is stupid. Usually, if you are wondering it, everyone else in the room is too. That courage is the heart of good journalism.
I love that. Curiosity requires courage. That's a bumper sticker right there. Okay. Before we wrap up, we have to look at the linguistic toolkit. The source provided some specific words of the week to help sharpen our vocabulary.
I love these. It's like sharpening your tools. You know, a carpenter has different chisels for different jobs. A writer has different words.
First one up, satiety.
Satiety. It sounds a little fancy, but it just comes from the word sated. It means the feeling of being full.
And it mentions this in the context of January resolutions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Diets. Hunger is satiable. You can satisfy it with a sandwich and achieve satiety. But the source makes the great point that some desires, like the desire for money or power or fame, are often insatiable. You can never get to satiety. You can never get full.
Deep. It's a word that carries a lot of philosophical weight. Next up, a pair. Scrum versus scree.
Two great words that kind of sound like what they are. Scrum comes from rugby, obviously. It's that ordered formation of players, heads down, pushing against each other. But we use it more broadly to describe any disorderly crowd, like a scrum of fans trying to get an autograph, or a scrum of reporters shouting questions.
A chaotic huddle. And scree.
If you've ever gone hiking, you know this one. Scree is that loose gravel on the side of a mountain. The stuff that slides under your boots and makes you lose your footing. He slipped on the scree and fell. It's a very specific, evocative word. It adds real texture to a scene.
I like this next one. Rapprochement.
The pronunciation on that one.
I know, right? It looks like rapprochement.
You gotta swallow the T. It's French. It comes from reclus, approach, to approach again, and it means reestablishing harmonious relations.
So if two countries have been at war for years and they finally sign a peace treaty,
that is a rapprochement. Or if estranged spouses finally start talking again and agree to be civil, it implies a return to friendliness after a period of conflict. It's a diplomatic word, but it's really useful for personal relationships too.
And finally, disingenuous.
This is such a useful word. It means false or insincere, but more specifically, it usually means the person knows more than they are admitting. They're pretending to be ignorant.
The example given in the source is the contractor.
Yeah. The roof on the house you just bought collapses. The contractor who built it says, "Oh, wow, I have no idea why that happened. What a mystery." But he knows full well that he used cheap, shoddy beams. He is being disingenuous. He is feigning innocence when he is not innocent at all.
And there's a nice little bit of wordplay in the source here to help remember it.
Yes. If you take the dis off the front, you have ingenuous, which means innocent or naive.
Like a child.
Right. And if you add an I in the middle, you get ingenious, which means clever or brilliant. So you have three words: disingenuous, ingenuous, ingenious, that all look similar but mean very, very different things.
English is a wild language.
It really is. It's a beautiful mess, but it's our mess.
So we have covered a lot of ground today. I mean, we've gone from the neuroscience of boredom and why you need to just stare at a wall sometimes.
All the way to the Mitch Albom rule of pacing and the emotional restraint of Hemingway's iceberg.
It's been a real journey through the mind.
It has.
If we had to boil this all down to a so what
Yeah.
for our listener, the learner, what is it? What's the bottom line?
I think it all comes down to intentionality, whether it's Springsteen practicing his guitar for 10 years so he can handle the pressure of the elevator, or Hemingway choosing to leave out a single sentence to create mystery, or just you deciding to put your phone away and stare out the window for 10 minutes. Good communication and good thinking, it isn't accidental.
It's choice. It's a choice. It's about choosing what to show, what to hide, and when to let your brain simply drift. It's about taking control of the process instead of just letting it happen to you.
That's a great takeaway. And I want to leave the listener with one final thought, kind of building on that iceberg theory we talked about.
Go for it.
We talked about how 90% of a good story is underwater. It's all subtext.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that applies to our daily lives, too. How much of our daily communication is actually subtext? When we talk to our partners, our kids, our colleagues, are we trusting them to connect the dots? Or are we over-explaining our own lives because we're afraid of being misunderstood?
That is a provocative thought. Maybe we all need to resist the urge to explain in our relationships, too. Trust a little more. Trust that the people who know us can see the 90%.
Something to mull over. Thanks for diving in with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.